ECHO, the Observer's Conscious Choice, presents interviewing Jaime Larrain on innovation on Enneagrams. Can you tell us about your new statements regarding Enneagrams? They're very stressing and concerning. I think people will get angry with me because I am changing everything. I'm changing capital sins, I'm changing triads, I'm changing everything. But I would like to clear out that I'm not changing definitions, I'm not changing typologies, so that all of the enneatypes according with their characteristics are still maintained. I am systematizing somehow the topic of emotions, sins, and triads in such a way so that we don't make mistakes. For example, one possible mistake is that when we talk about the fourth enneatype, we talk about that it's envy. Nevertheless, envy has two components. It has a component of anger and sadness. And fourth does not have anger. And I could prove this in my sessions in therapy. There is no anger. There's a lot of sadness, but there is no anger. So somehow this does not fit that envy would characterize this enneatype. So I started to revise what happened with all of the enneatypes, and I realized that the triad of the feelings in relation to what Palmer stated is not an emotion, but the triad that involves fear, anger is. So there's a methodological problem there that we have to solve. So what would be the emotion that might represent the triad of the type 3 and type 4? And after analyzing this, I came to the conclusion that it was sadness. So we had the triad of anger, sadness, and fear. And that somehow I started to have a doubt about the sixth enneatype, which is the most difficult enneatype that has given me problems. And even though I realized this Woody Allen thing about the character who had contradictions and he refuting himself constantly, I also felt that he had a tendency to be paranoid, without being clinically paranoid, of course. So I started to cross Plutchik's emotions, being clinically paranoid. So what I did is I started to cross these emotions in relation to Plutchik's concept of extreme opposites in terms of sadness and happiness and anger and acceptance as the most important things. And then I realized that it could be a circle in which you could have the three triads, which are anger, sadness, and the one in the middle, which is equivalent to 5, 6, and 7 in the Enneagram. And the mixture of these two emotions, as Plutchik suggests, is envy. So somehow I feel that there's sadness, anger, and envy. But then where's fear? So I realized that fear is involved in all of these triads, which are the emotions and are unpleasant emotions. So pleasant emotions are in the top part, which are happiness, which is contrary to sadness, and acceptance, which is contrary to anger. But then I was looking at envy, and envy is left out. And then love is a mixture between acceptance and happiness. So somehow this does not fit. So for several months I was thinking about where was my scheme failing, because what I was trying to create was to create some sort of a theory, and in relation to that Ken Wilber's theory of unifying things. So I realized that it is actually fear is what invades these three triads. And what is fear? Fear is an emotion which is a precautionary emotion in which you don't want to suffer what you suffered when you were a child. And that sort of suffering and pains, what I call, are 6. I typified the 6 most crucial pains that a child can suffer. For example, losing someone, abandonment when someone leaves, rejection, when your parents don't like you, and they somehow reject you with their attitude, with their looks. Abuse, which might be physical, sexual, psychological, or psychological. And the abuse that is felt by Enneatype number 5, in which he feels invaded. This is also an abuse. The other terrible pain that we have is punishment. And the last one, comparison. When you are being compared to your brother, to your neighbor. And to avoid this repetition of pain, we construct our ego. We construct our personality so that we can defend ourselves from this happening again. So what I could do is to typify the 9 fears that characterize each one of the Enneatypes. And they also characterize the triads with their emotions. And I realized that fear has its origin in attachment. It's an attachment to a suffering from the past. And if I can get rid of that attachment, then I can live in the present without suffering that from the past. And if I am not attached to my expectations of the future, then I can also live in the present. And that is the sensation of well-being, the wonderful sensation of living in the present. In terms of passions and sins, and in relation to these emotions, what can you tell us? Well, basically, yes, things change, and sins change as well. Now, the sins per se are not very important because this is just branding. As long as we don't change the characteristics that are found in each Enneatype, which I maintain, of course, but I totally agree with, and I know they're worked in detail, they can lead us to confusions, though. For example, when we talk about Enneatype 4 and the capital sin envy, which is the mixture of anger and sadness, we would not be deviating ourselves from understanding the Enneatype 4 in its sadness. Now, in terms of the 6th Enneatype, which is one of the difficult Enneatypes, it is also typified as fear. And this is not a capital sin because there are 7 capital sins and we have 9 here. I think somebody talked about 9 sins. I think it was Oscar Echazo, but I'm not sure. Anyways, to maintain fear at this point, what we're doing is we are skipping the character, the moving character, or the shifting of movement between anger and sadness, because this is in the middle. So anger and sadness provide envy. It's not the envy of being envious of having what somebody else has, as it has been defined before, but it's the movement and the change between 2 emotions, which is an active one and a passive one. An active one being anger and a passive one being sadness. And this coming and going is where 6 has problems, and he theorizes and he creates scenarios so he can understand life. And in terms of attachment to this great doubt is what produces fear. Fear that characterizes number 6, which is typified in the fear of authority. So the whole circle starts to change, the circle of passions or sins, because, for example, sometimes 9, we have said that 4 corresponds to sloth. When he connects to himself, then 9, what would be 9 then? And probably it's probably shame, because the shame of not knowing who he is, of not accepting himself and not being able to express himself. And in number 8, lust is okay. 8 is characterized by lust, but I believe that basically it's anger what best represents 8. And also arrogance, what represents 1. Maintaining pride in number 2. Gluttony in 7. In 5, avarice, which is okay, perfect. But then the scenario changes. And all of this scenario is not about changing names. It's so that we are not misled and we don't make mistakes when we talk about developing conscience in therapy. Finally, if we go back to the origins of Enneagrams and we talk about the essence of its functionalities, which deals with personal growth, what is the value that you can say about these new findings or these new discoveries that you have made? Now, in relation to the usefulness of Enneagrams, apart from understanding the typologies of personalities, I think that the main contribution is in terms of developing conscience. So in this graph that I was explaining to you, when I discovered that it's the attachment what generates this anticipatory fear of not being able to fear again, and this is what causes all of this issue, which makes us construct an ego to defend ourselves, to be able to wear some sort of clothing so people don't see us the way we are. In that sense, I think that I am quite calm with what I found, because I started to relate everything. And I related it with Ken Wilber's proposal when he talks about the theory of everything, which is definite the purpose. It's a philosophical question. It's why are we here? What is our mission? So I am quite calm with my findings, because I discovered that the topic of the attachment, the issue of attachment about traveling to the past and bringing back from the past, you can bring experiences to the present. But when it brings back pain and it feels these pains in the present, that is what is unpleasant. Or when you go to the future, you travel to the future and you innovate and you project things, and then you are stuck to an image of something that you want for the future, then you feel frustrated. So the attachment and expectations are what produce this unpleasant feeling and discomfort, and they take us away from living the present. So if I could go to the past and then come back from the past only with experiences, or maybe go to the future and only come back with projects without expectations and frustrations, then that means that I am living in the right now, in the perfect present. And that is the answer to a philosophical question. Living right now, I don't worry about time anymore, because I've overcome the dimensions of time, and I transform myself in an interdimensional being. And at that moment, I connect myself. And what do I mean by connecting? Between this and what's beyond. And I'm not talking about God or anything like that. It's about my spiritual being connecting with my human being. And this becomes a spiritual act. And through this act, you feel harmony, you feel plenitude. And this is an ascending road in which all fears are dissipating and attachments dissipate, until, like for example, let's pretend that they are all solved. That is the moment that I called enlightenment. So therefore, everybody is going to be enlightened along this path according to his or her enneatype, as Jesus is 9 and Buddha is 5, Osho is 7. Everybody has their own way and their own way to enlightenment. And that makes me very happy, because not having external models is always good, because the master is inside, not outside. It's about making your way easy.